If you're a young person considering the trades, look it up. There's tons of great options. And if you decide to do it, treat it like a real career. And, I think you can go pretty far.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Fine Homebuilding contributor and production manager at TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwandt. Today, I am joined by lead carpenter, Antonio Lama. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Antonio, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in the building trades.
So I'm 26. I grew up in Spring Green, Wisconsin. That's about an hour west of Madison, Wisconsin. It's the home to the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture, Taliesin House on the Rock, some of those popular attractions. And I pretty much grew up in the trades. My dad is a general contractor. My family owns a small construction business. I pretty much just grew up in the trades. I joke around that I kind of learned to read on Fine Homebuilding because there was always a big stack of them in our bathroom. I grew up, my dad, I'm a second generation carpenter. My dad does a little bit of everything, but I'd say, carpentry is kind of his trade. That's just, I've kind of been doing it from day one.
Where did your dad pick up the trade from? Does it go further back in your family, or is that an interest that he started?
I don't think it goes further back. He grew up in upstate New York, and I think he just started working doing carpentry and masonry when he was in high school, and then in college, just to pay his way through school. But I don't think that I know of. I don't think anybody in his family was a carpenter in the trades at all.
So you grew up working with him on job sites when you're out of school, summertime, Christmas vacation, all that good stuff?
Yep. Yeah, pretty much every summer for as long as I can remember, I was helping him out on the job site.
Does he have a big company, or is he more of a sole proprietor, one-man show?
It's pretty small. Like right now, he's getting close to retiring. So he's only got a couple guys that work for him. When I was end of high school, beginning of college, he was doing some bigger projects and he had some bigger crews, but never anything huge though. I think I'm trying to remember the biggest crew we ever had was maybe like five to seven guys. So nothing huge.
And after you got out of high school, you actually went to college and pursued what many people would consider to be a professional degree. What made you not jump right into the trades outside of high school? So,
I think like any kid, because I grew up doing that with my family, I was like, I don't want to do this at all. I was like, I don't want to swing a hammer. I don't want to do any of that stuff. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I got to school. I enjoyed when I was, my freshman year, I was taking like intro to economics and stuff. And I really enjoyed those classes. And I knew that economics is kind of a broad degree. So that's what I decided to pursue as a major. But then by the time I got to be a senior and graduating, I realized I didn't want to work in an office. I didn't want to be inside all the day. So when I graduated, I started looking for jobs. None of them really appealed to me. And to be quite honest, none of the entry-level jobs were paying what I was making as a tradesman. So I decided to pick up the hammer and tool bags and get back to it.
Do you find as being a lead carpenter that the econ background and degree work that you did helps you out at all, understanding the finances or how to manage other people?
I would say directly, I don't think I have a huge advantage over anyone who didn't go to college. I don't find myself, doing anything that my education taught me that somebody without that education couldn't do. I would say indirectly, the two big benefits I think of having that higher education. The first is that, you spend a lot of time when you're at university, you spend a lot of time around people that have a lot of different ideas and, people that are trying to learn more and better themselves and whatever. And when we're in the field, we're working for clients that are professors, they're doctors, they're lawyers. And I'm comfortable talking to those kind of people because I met those people when I was at school. I'm comfortable, sharing ideas, being respectful. I'd like to think I don't sound like a complete moron. And then the other way I think that it helps is if if you went to college or have any sort of, not necessarily just a college degree, but if you pursued higher education, at some point you had to, learn to do real peer-reviewed research, disseminate information, that sort of thing. And so I think in the trades, there's a ton of information that's really readily available. And there's a lot of people that don't take advantage of it. So I think I have the ability to, find good information, disseminate it from the bad information, and keep learning in a valuable manner. So I think that's an advantage to having the degree.
I've noticed through my career that the tradespeople that I've worked with who keep that curiosity going throughout their entire career really have a strong leg up on somebody who maybe doesn't have that varied interest or ability to sift through that information. Have you worked with any other people that were maybe career changers that came from a kind of white collar office situation to working in the field?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting. The company I'm working at now, I think most of the carpenters there have at least a bachelor's degree in something, not related to the trades. So, excuse me, right off the top of my head, I know there's one guy that I work with who has a degree in computer science. There's a lady, she has a degree in social work. Another guy has a degree in biology. So there's, most of the people I work with actually that I can think of right now do have a degree in something not really related to the trades. And I think if you were to talk to them, they'd probably say the same thing, that, it helps them to better themselves through their own research and whatnot.
What other interests do you have in building? You and I have talked before about high performance building, but do you have anything outside of the building, the standard job that you do that interests you? Like, are you looking to someday have your own business or run a company for someone else?
Yeah. So, you kind of nailed it right there. The high performance thing, that's what really, really excites me. I think it's super cool. It's super interesting. And I think it's something that's, I think it's the future of building, to be honest. Like, I'm surprised more people aren't excited about it. And yeah, definitely down the road. The long-term goal is to someday have my own business, and I'd like to focus on building, high performance structures. That's kind of the plan. That's what I'm aiming for right now.
How did you get exposed to that, or where did your interest in that type of work come from?
So I was exposed to it through my dad, and I think he was exposed to it through Fine Homebuilding. It's funny because that's just something he's always been really interested in too. And growing up, I just sort of thought that a lot of these ideas, hyper insulated, super airtight structures, I thought that was just kind of like the standard. Because that's just what my dad talked about all the time. And then when I started, working with different contractors and stuff, I realized that a lot of people don't think that's necessary. And some people even kind of think it's a little unnecessary. I think it's a little stupid. So yeah, that's an interesting thing about that. But yeah, I was kind of turned on to that from my dad. He kind of found out about it through Fine Homebuilding. And then we have a family friend who's an architect. Her name is Amber Westerman. And she's super into that sort of thing. And that's, I think her and my dad have worked together a lot. I think that's kind of how he got turned on to that as well.
Yeah, I'm going to have Amber on the Pro Talk podcast later on. She's scheduled for an upcoming taping. Did you work on any of her projects with your dad?
So I've worked on a number of different projects that she's designed and he's been the GC for over the years. Right off the top of my head, besides I worked on her house a little bit, her personal house. The other big project that I worked on was there was a old barn that was actually turned into a residence. It was like an old dairy barn. So that was kind of the other big one. But yeah, so my dad's been working with Amber. I mean, I've probably known Amber most of my life. Like I can't remember not knowing her. So she's been a family friend for a long time, and they've been working together for as long as I can remember.
And she's done some work in Fine Homebuilding that some people will have read. I believe her project was called Poem Homes.
Yep. That's kind of like her side hustle.
Yeah, and those are high performance homes that your dad is working as the GC on.
So he basically, she started, she kind of got this idea for these poem homes, and she wanted to make one for herself, and it's sort of like a demonstration home. So she acted as a general contractor. I believe in her article, she refers to my dad as like the wingman. He kind of helped guide her through the process of being a GC. But after that, I think she's gotten a few other, I actually can't speak to that, but I'm pretty sure she's had a good deal of interest, and I'm sure she's designed a few more of them, but he hasn't been the GC for any of those. But we worked on hers though.
Are those like in the passive house style, or are they more a net zero type of high performance build?
I think the poem home itself, I mean, the concept I think is sort of broad. I think it kind of depends on how far the client wants to take it. So I think some of them are more in the passive house style. Some of them are just kind of in the net zero style. So yeah, I can't speak to that. I don't actually know. I haven't talked to her about what she's got, coming down the pipeline and whatnot.
Where does your interest lie in those types of high performance building? Because it is a pretty wide range in how far you can take the super insulated or net zero or passive house. Where do you see your interest lying?
I think I've read about a lot of them. The passive houses, and maybe it's just because, I'm in the Midwest and it's not a super popular thing. It doesn't pique my interest as much as just like a really well-built, kind of like your pretty good house, something that's well-built, airtight, well-insulated, good mechanicals, all that sort of stuff. That's kind of where my interest is. The passive houses, I think they're super cool, but it seems, from my perspective, it doesn't pique my interest as much because it seems like it's a hard sell for a lot of people, It seems like if somebody has the money to spend on a passive house, they might not actually care that much about the energy savings down the road. You know what I mean? But my interest, I would say it stops a little short of passive homes. I like the idea of just building a really well built, super insulated, super airtight, energy efficient house.
Do you find it hard doing the remodeling work and feel like you're kind of on vanity projects most of the time, where maybe having your background and your education level, you see a better way that the money could be spent?
I mean, it's always easy to be critical of how people spend their money. But no, I don't. I mean, a lot of the stuff we do, I would say we're building projects, we're building additions, we're doing remodels and stuff we're doing it to the best of our ability. I mean, if somebody has a house that was built in the 1900s and they want to put an addition on it, there's only so airtight and so hyper insulated that addition can be that will actually make a difference, because the rest of the house is probably super leaky and drafty and has horsehair insulation. So no, it doesn't bother me too much. I'd say for the most part, we practice some really good building methods, as good as we can for what we're doing. The only part of it that I dislike is that it's, the only part about like remodeling that I'm not a huge fan of is it's kind of the same thing over and over again. A lot of times, with these additions, it's never anything super exciting. So I'm hoping in the future to kind of get into doing more new construction and getting a chance to really kind of like get into more of the high performance building stuff and really sort of test my skills in that arena.
Do you find that the remodeling work being kind of subcontractor heavy, you don't get that opportunity to be involved in a project from the, digging the hole all the way through to kind of handing the keys to the homeowner that maybe you would get in?
100%. And I don't know, I think it's dependent on the company you work for. I think some companies their carpenters are more involved through the whole process. But right now, I definitely would like to be more involved from day one till the end. And I'm not super, I do a lot of demo, a lot of framing, a little bit of finish work. So that's definitely something that I feel.
I think there's a misconception that the lead carpenter is that person, but at a lot of companies, I think like the ones you've worked at, you end up working with some project managers who are helping direct your work, right?
Yes. I mean, a lot of it depends, the company I work for right now, there's a lot of different project managers and they all kind of have their own style. Some of them are really hands off. Some of them are really hands on. So it kind of just depends, I would say, on the project manager. I mean, it also depends on the company, but yeah, there's definitely, it's definitely not like there's definitely a pretty big separation between management and being in the field. I'm not making any big decisions essentially.
When you try and move over to something like new construction, where do you see the difference in skill set that you need between remodeling and that new construction work, having done both?
So I've worked on a couple new homes, and I'd say the biggest thing is I think you have to think about efficiency. If you're remodeling, you can try and think 3 steps ahead, but you don't even know what's coming up. You don't know how the house is framed. You don't know what's rotted. You don't know what you're going to find. So it doesn't really make sense to get too far ahead of yourself because things change really fast. Whereas I think specifically, I'm doing mostly framing right now. And when we're doing new construction, we're doing big new projects. The goal is to just make things move as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and always kind of be thinking a couple steps down the line, especially when you have a crew. I try to make sure that nobody's standing around ever. Nobody's waiting for something to do. Whereas when you're remodeling, sometimes that's just how it goes. You find something you weren't expecting and everything kind of comes to a screeching halt.
Are you in a position as a lead carpenter where you are looked at as someone who has to solve the problems that come up in a remodeling project? Yeah,
I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't say that I have to solve the problems. I think there's plenty of people above me that would be willing to help me, but I like to solve them myself if I can. I try. My goal, I'm still pretty young. My goal is to be the carpenter where you can send him on site and he'll call you back in 2 weeks and the job is done. I'd like to be that guy that's not having to ask a bunch of questions. When problems come up, I do my best, unless it's something where it's like, it's going to change the design, then obviously I want to make sure that the designer can talk to the clients and whatnot. But if I can figure it out myself, that's the goal.
What's a particularly challenging remodeling project that you've worked on recently where you had to put that into practice?
I'm trying to think. The last few have been pretty straightforward. There was one I was just on where the whole plan was laid out they thought that it was, standard framing, when it was actually balloon framed. So I basically had to, let in a bunch of headers, kind of beef up the floor system in certain spots, all that sort of thing. It wasn't too challenging, but it was one of those things where I kind of realized, okay, I have to throw the plans out. The specs are the same as far as the dimensions of what I'm building, but nothing else, none of the framing stuff on the plans is actually relevant anymore because it's balloon framed.
It ends up like you're working without plans at that point, right?
Yeah. And then the current project I'm working on, it's a huge demolition, and it was the house is clad in brick, and they assumed that it was wood framing under the brick. But once we peeled off the bricks, we realized that it's actually all CMU. So that's going to be an interesting one. We're about to start cutting the roof off of that and then knocking down block walls next week, probably. So
That's
we'll see.
An
We'll see how that one
atypical
goes.
construction style for this area, right? Most homes that are brick homes in this area are still wood framed buildings, right?
Yeah, I don't actually understand why it's the part that, so it's a house kind of in a sort of historical area of downtown Madison. The original part of the house is wood with brick cladding. And then this is an addition that was added, I think in the I want to say early to mid 1900s. So I don't know why it's made of block instead of wood, but yeah, it's not something I've encountered before.
So you've talked about wanting to get into the new construction work and possibly having your own company or being a manager. Do you want to just try and focus on high performance homes, or do you want to be maybe a more inclusive or open to different styles of building? Any like commercial work aspirations, or are you thinking at some point you want to just pivot straight into the high performance building?
I mean, right now, like the high performance stuff is what's interesting to me, but I mean, I like building stuff in general, so I'm not opposed to anything. If somebody were to come to me and say like, hey, I just want a house built and I just want it to be a good house, I wouldn't say no or anything like that. High performance, that's what I'm staying up at night reading articles about. But in general, just building is cool. And I think especially as somebody who has kind of a background in framing, even if I'm working on something that isn't necessarily, energy efficient, high performance, whatever, if there's some cool framing involved, like, heck yeah, I'm game.
What are some of the things that you've stayed up at night reading about high performance building wise that really pique your interest and drive what you want to do in the future?
The thing that's interesting to me is, I guess I shouldn't say interesting, but the thing that kind of keeps me up at night is there's so many different ways to get to the same goal. And I'm always looking at them like, which one is the most cost effective? Which one could you do the quickest? Double stud walls versus exterior insulation versus, whatever. So the biggest thing, and I sort of try to draw on my own experience, but I'm always looking at these things like, okay, if we did this way, how could we do it but make it faster? Like that's the biggest drawback, I think, that to building high performance stuff is that it just takes longer to do these extra details, So what interests me the most is taking the concept of something that's super high performance, super well built, whatever, and then saying, okay, like how can we do this but make it, maybe just a little more affordable, make the process just a little bit more dummy proof, whatever. So that's kind of where my interest is right now. I think I have a fairly solid grasp on, for our climate zone and whatnot, like what's standard, what would a standard high performance house look like? But the question is, how do you do it and make it cost effective for the client? The idea, right, is that, we want to build a house that's energy efficient, and in the long run, we want them to save some money. So it's like, if we can cut down the initial costs, then that's a win-win for everyone.
And you recently bought your own home. Do you have any aspirations of beefing up the performance of your house?
To be perfectly honest, no. I want to, my goal right now is to, keep saving. I've got a pretty good deal on the house. I'd like to keep saving. And then eventually I'd like to build my own house and, either sell this one or rent it out. It's a really nice little house, but it's not like my dream house. And as far as energy efficiency goes, I haven't poked any holes in the walls, but the house was built in the very early 1900s, and all the walls are drywall. There's no lath or plaster, so I'm assuming it was remodeled. It's obviously remodeled at some point, and it seems pretty airtight. Like it doesn't get cold. There's no like noticeable drafts. So I'm assuming that when they remodeled it, they probably re-insulated all the walls. So it's actually, I mean, as of right now, I have no real complaints,
But in the future, it could end up being kind of like an experiment of some stuff that you might want to do for your own home. I know that's the way a lot of carpenters who end up building their own homes going to start with their first home as an experiment and kind of see what you can accomplish on your own and what you can get away with. But it sounds like you've got something that's somebody else has already done the work to.
Yeah, I mean, I like looking around. There's nothing that I can right off the top of my head that I can say as far as like energy efficiency goes. There's nothing I can say I'd want to change right away. I mean, the windows are all they're all good windows. They're all new. Everything's pretty good. I mean, it feels like it's pretty airtight. If I were to make any immediate changes, it's got vinyl siding, which I just abhor. I'd probably rip off the siding and put some exterior foam on, and then put some different siding on. But that's the only thing I can think of. I mean, it's a good solid little house. These old houses, I feel like the construction of these old houses is either really good, really solid, or really, really bad. And before I bought it, I poked around, and it's good. It's all old dimensional lumber. So yeah.
Yeah, it helps to know a little bit about what you're looking for when you start poking around in a
I think
prospective purchase.
The lady who was showing us the house was kind of like, she was like, "What are you guys doing?" We were climbing around in the attic and in the crawl spaces and stuff. And she was just like, "You guys need to chill out."
You didn't warn her up front that you're in the business of tearing apart
I
houses?
I don't know if she was expecting me to get on my hands and knees and go into the crawl spaces and whatnot.
Well, and you bought it during a pretty high demand time in the market. So she was probably thinking, do you want it or not? Just make up your mind.
Yeah, no, we thankfully we got, I'd say we got a decent price on it, but yeah, it's definitely a weird time to buy. And yeah, we kind of we were so tired of renting that we decided we found this nice little house. We're just going to jump on it.
Yeah. Use it as a springboard to building your own place.
Exactly. So
that people who are watching this on YouTube might have already figured this out, but those of you who are just listening, and not being able to see the broad shoulders of Antonio, maybe aren't quite keyed into his other hobby. Can you tell us a little bit about your other competitive hobby that you have?
So I compete in powerlifting. For those of you that don't know, powerlifting is squat, bench, and deadlift. And because I'm sure everybody will ask, my best squat is 766. My best bench is 474 pounds, and my best deadlift is 705 pounds. And those are raw, so no equipment. So yeah, I do powerlifting, and I think it's actually I think I'm one of the only, as far as I know like one other guy that's a carpenter that does powerlifting. There's not a lot of, I think it's kind of difficult to do the two, and it's especially difficult to be competitive.
Yeah, and you have an actual competition coming up soon, right?
Yeah, I have one this weekend. So hopefully beat those numbers.
Yeah, you post some pretty crazy stuff on your Instagram. We'll have to try and take that in the show notes. But do you find that that helps you on job sites, or do other guys or people on the crew look at you like, hey, why don't you just pick that up and hold it up there quick while we nail that beam off?
So thankfully, as a carpenter, like the heaviest thing I ever have to pick up is like an LVL or something. So it's never anything too heavy. So I do think it helps. I mean, it's never going to hurt to be strong. And I always tell people, like, if you can deadlift 700 pounds, you're not going to hurt your back, picking up a window or something. So I think, as far as, I'm a competitive powerlifter. Like when I get close to a competition and I'm lifting really heavy weights every week, like I'm pretty sore when I'm at work. Like I'm definitely not loving it, but I only do, 1 or 2 meets a year. So it's the rest of the time I feel great. And I think that a lot of people in the trades could really benefit from, spending just a little extra time outside of work, taking care of themselves, because there's so many guys I see that they have injuries. And it's like, it's so, when we're working in the field, everything we do, we're swinging a hammer, picking up a nail gun, whatever, it's all kind of such a similar motion. And then you get these injuries from overuse. And I think a lot of that could just be avoided by just a little bit of extra time. You don't have to go to a gym or something, but just a little extra time outside of work, doing just some exercises and stuff, some corrective stuff that could help people. That's a big question I get a lot. Like I always have people that are like, hey, my back hurts or my shoulder hurts or my knees hurt. Like, what can I do? And, it doesn't take a lot to sort of alleviate some of those issues in the field.
I was going to ask you if you found yourself trying to counsel people that you were working with on like proper ways to lift stuff, but it sounds like ends up being a regular portion of your
it happens
work
quite a bit. And there's actually there's already quite a few powerlifting coaches that teach they teach courses on like just simple, strength and conditioning for like firefighters, military. And I'm kind of hoping that at some point it works its way into the trades, because I think we'd see a lot, I think we'd see workman's comp claims go down. We'd see people that are just able to last longer and be more comfortable at work. I think in a lot of people's mind, they think like, oh, you go to the gym, like you're destroying your body, your knees must be sore. But if you're doing things intelligently, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah. The learning to stretch and take care of yourself and lifting properly, those were certainly things that other people pushed on me, and even other
Absolutely.
Safety things. Like I credit the fact that I can still hear pretty good from somebody who told me when I was like 20 that you've got to wear earplugs when you demo. You don't want to
get better about that.
You don't want to be smashing hammers and bars around, but it's been great talking to you on here, Antonio.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anything else that you want to talk to the audience about, or ask questions of the Fine Homebuilding listener brain?
The only thing the only kind of parting words, and this is kind of for the young guys out there. If you're a young person considering the trades, there's a lot of awesome options. I'm a carpenter. That's mainly because, down the road, I want to be a contractor, but, there's a ton of awesome trades. And so I'd say if you're interested in it, it's definitely a really viable career choice, and you can do super well for yourself. And the last piece of advice I'd give is, if you decide to pursue a trade, treat it like an actual profession, and it will take you really far. There's a lot of guys that they show up to work in their pajamas and their hair looks a mess and they look like they're homeless. And it's like, it's really not that hard to just, show up, wear some clean clothes, tuck your shirt in, be there on time, and you'll already be ahead of a lot of people. So those are my two pieces of advice. If you're interested in getting in the trades, look it up. There's tons of great options. And if you decide to do it, treat it like a real career. And, I think you can go pretty far.
Well, that's great words to end on. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, suggestions to finehomebuildingpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us wherever you're listening. It helps other folks find the podcast. Stay safe, everybody, and thanks again for listening.